Welcome to Fusing the Unfusible. Today we have a special guest, Rishi Talwalker. Welcome, Rishi.
Hi, Kareem.
Rishi is a Senior Director of Communications and of Strategy and Growth at Havas Middle East, where he leads strategic communications and new business work streams. He employs a creative approach, combining tools across traditional and digital platforms to deliver impactful campaigns for clients across diverse sectors. Welcome.
It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I think, comms, communication, such a key part of launching a new project or rebranding or, no matter what industry. In more analog times in the past, it was enough, as a life cycle to do a launch party, do a couple of articles, get a few articles in the news, and then the business tends to grow. And unless you mess up the customer service badly or you have a bad product, you grow organically. This is no longer the case. And how do you explain that to your potential customers, and what percentage would you say understand the need for continuous communications?
Look, I think you just have to break it down and make it as common sense as possible. If you imagine how you consume content, very often you navigate content in its analog form, but also on your devices and multiple devices. And then there's content that comes your way more organic, native in your environment. It's very succinctly called the merged media model. It's something that we've sort of applied at Havas successfully across all our verticals. But at Havas Red, what that means is that we're constantly telling our brand partners, our clients, that you do have to employ a paid, earned, shared, and owned, so PISO model. Not all impact will come through just earning placement. Some of it has to be promoted. Some of it has to be bought. Eventually, it has to land on sort of the diverse media mix that your audience is sort of checked into.
We're in the attention economy, and I think that continuous need that we've this habits or addiction that we have for continuously having content and media, that newness, continuously looking for the next best thing, that dopamine hit, has turned us into these kind of addicted beings. And now brands understand that unless they continuously communicate, continuously engage, they will not get the growth that they get.
That's it. And I mean, and a lot of that can be owned content. It can be platforms that are conversations like these, for example, that brands have started veering towards investing in. And the outreach side of those things, the content curating, that is where communications comes into play, but potentially marketing it or amplifying it is where you need to bring in a paid element. And those are things that brands have obviously learned. It's probably been a decade that brands have been on the same page. It's an evolving sort of learning curve for many people. I feel like no one's averse to getting it right. It's just a confusing sort of roadmap. And a lot of times that means that they bring in experts to do just that.
Such as yourselves.
Such as us, yes.
Such as yourselves. So, you work across industries at Havas, and, luxury, beauty, and others. What industry do you find, or, sector do you find the most innovative in terms of understanding digital or some of the leading cutting edge techniques and best practices?
Look, I mean, there's no right answer, but there's no wrong answer either to that. I feel like there's a charm with homegrown, hungry startups, businesses that are more agile, that will make a decision today if they just choose to trust you and relinquish some control, which is very hard to do when it's the founder's own equity invested in a business. It can be magical. At the same time, best practices, institutionalized processes, things that sort of are more international, big brands do bring that. And, just to see that machine at play, to be able to sort of fall in line with a structure versus having to create one from the ground up, can both be challenging and rewarding.
And I think you learn. So I think they sometimes bring new ideas and new techniques as well. If you're working
100%.
with some of these global brands that I know
Yeah.
you guys work with, that's cool. Now, with new ventures, and product launches and rebranding efforts, right? Sometimes you have to do that, or you're involved in that. What are some of the key mistakes that you want to help them avoid as much as possible?
Look, I mean, I think it always comes down to planning. If you plan to fail, then you fail to plan. So bring your agency partner on board early, even before you've thought about what that rebranding, the launch event, what that would look like. I feel like that's a common mistake, especially with entities, clients, brands that work with agencies inconsistently, where they're doing things sporadically, where it's like
More ad hoc.
more ad hoc, more like a cardiogram. What you want is consistency. What you want is an even sort of flow of engagement and momentum. And so if you were to have 20 peaks in a year, that looks like it's more achievable versus having one summit and then like you just like drop from there.
It makes me think of medicine, right? If you take your medicine at the same time every day, your body starts to kind of use it properly. But if you keep forgetting or you miss it, then the dose drops down. Then you can't fight.
Absolutely,
you can't fight the virus. You can't fight it, and then you end up. The medicine becomes ineffective. And I think that social media campaigns and comms works probably in the same way.
Yeah.
And the algorithms as well, I think, pick that up as well.
100%. You hit it on the nail, right? Like, I feel like there are merits to discipline, to routine, to habit and structure. You said medicine, I'll say exercise, because that's something that I've discovered also requires, just having to show up. And that's it, right? Just show up. For a lot of brands that want to make a big splash, they don't realize that their competitors or others that they look up to have been building up to that moment for months, years, even if not weeks. To imagine that we have this new launch, or you gave the example of a rebranding campaign, and for it to land and for it to go, I love the word viral, immediately, doesn't happen. You just have to be present, and you have to build a tribe. You have to have an audience that will then help amplify that message, because that's where it's all at.
It makes me think of this idea that, my belief, and you're the expert here, but my belief is that you can't go viral by design, right? It's a bit of luck. It's a bit of trial and error.
Yeah.
So, social media campaigns and posts and content, you have to generate a lot of it and keep playing around with it until something bites. And then the ones that bite, you promote, you push. The 100%. Ones that you don't, you try and shut down so that you avoid,
Yeah, it's iterative, right? Like with everything digital, you learn and you adapt and you change. The trick that you used a few months ago may be very commonplace today because you started a trend and everyone jumped on it. And it won't work the second, third, and fourth time. Or it will work, to a lesser degree. If you want incremental growth, I think it's important to just be in the conversation, to listen as intently as you want to speak, right? And there are so many tools. There's so much changing. There's behavior, and the thing that's changing faster than anything else is culture. If you look at the generations that every brand now wants to start talking, engaging more seriously, is Gen Z, because they have amazing spending power. And then Gen Alpha comes right after that. And you've got content that you're still, crafting with a millennial in mind. It's a bit dated, but because the decision maker, or because the person that wants to eventually own this content or own the platform feels like that's what is on brand for them, they're missing the point. I think this year at the Cannes Festival of Creativity, we saw a lot of great work being celebrated that had just about disrupted the brand's mold. And there may be many examples you could pick up and read about, but that was consistent. And so throw the brand book out once in a while, have some fun with it. Let your agency have some fun with it.
Well, one thing that I come from consulting background that we do and we ask for is persona mapping.
Correct. Yeah.
And in layman's terms, basically saying know who your audience is, right? So your audience isn't just everyone. You need to kind of be very targeted. Target. So you were mentioning Gen Z, Gen Alpha. You build that persona. You start to think about there's some planning that happens there. What do they want? What are they looking for? What are they interested in? What don't they like? What makes them tick? Right? What's emotional? What is their emotional behavior? And building that becomes a really important asset because with that now you can start to create content for that persona. And if you don't create those personas, you're really spraying and praying, right?
100%. Look, data and consumer insight is at the heart of everything, even more so now in mainstream communications. What you do have to realize is that you can't craft everything to fit every single sort of layer of that audience. A generation and a generation-wide set of preferences is still quite, scratching the surface. We actually conduct research continuously, and there are waves of research focused on different topics. So coming out of COVID, there was a generation next sort of piece, and the methodology is very we try and speak to a set of consumers that are ahead of their generation or ahead of their group. It's called prosumers at Havas, and we do a prosumer report on different topics. Most recently, we launched one on luxury. Before that, we launched one on, it was called Joyful Frugality, because the whole trend of frugality is picking up, especially with, very engaged, very capable young Gen Zs who are not spending that much, who are pulling back. And this year at Cannes, we saw a lot of conversation around sort of the Ozempic revolution. So there are going to be consumers, even in, as old as the millennials or older than that will potentially be less hungry and hence much more mindful about how they're spending their money or what they're consuming. And not just literally consuming, but even otherwise. So
I love the label, but it's the Ozempic generation, and it's a double-edged.
100%. Everything is.
Yeah, I mean the whole, and if we tie it into how I got into my domain, which is Web3, it is from inflation. It is from that excessive printing. And then it caused that excessive spending that's causing all the inflation, right? So coming back and saying, what do we really want?
Absolutely.
And being much more mindful of what we buy. And then obviously the whole climate change, sustainability thing, you start to think about what you buy and how it affects the climate. And so, that is a very, let's say, preoccupying a certain segment of the society.
100%. And I feel like also, learning from Web3, everything is decentralized, right? In real life or in IRL situations, that means fandom. Now, Kareem, you and I may have nothing else in common other than, say, an interest in CrossFit. That makes us part of a tribe that a brand could speak to. And we saw some really cool work come out of different brands that have understood that they're not speaking to demographics as much as they're speaking to fandoms. So it's not about going viral anymore. It's about, deep insights, thick data. It's about learning behaviors of especially sort of interested fandoms. Like, can you imagine Netflix is as active in the Korean sort of K series or K drama space because they've found Saudi women that have learned Korean to be able to watch those shows. And if you can teach yourself a language just because you're that deeply invested in content, I mean, you found a tribe right there.
I think that's also because TV shows is a great way to learn language. I've improved my multiple languages by watching subtitles or watching it in that language with English subtitles. It's really powerful, and it's fascinating to hear that Saudi women are learning to speak Korean just to watch TV shows. A lot of the people in the Middle East do speak Turkish because of the Turkish soaps, and they learn it just by watching TV shows. So, if you could get into your customers' minds. Now we're talking about your customers, so the Marcom teams or the people that lead the discussions. Usually, if it's a small entity that might not have a big Marcom team, it might be just a CEO. If it's a startup, it's a smaller team. But if you could get into their minds, and convince them or pass one really key message, what would that be?
Leave a seat at the table. Leave a seat at the table for the expert. I mean, don't make assumptions. Don't speak over your partners, because they sometimes come with just like you're an expert in your domain, they probably bring expertise in the space that you've actually hired them to help you. So that holds true for big brands, massive Marcom teams, internal capabilities, external partners, whoever you work with, whatever size they are. That's one rule that holds good for everybody. And I could go on about budgets, ATL versus BTL, but I'm not going to touch that right now.
Listen, that topic is really interesting, and I can tell you from my own personal experience, whenever I try to engage with an expert, I try to provide as much content as possible, context as possible, so that it's not just generic best practices that especially in social media, right? It's so all over the place, but you get to hear the same things over and over. I want somebody's expertise, but I want it to be contextualized. So I think it's really important to provide context, right? And for the experts to listen, because sometimes some of them do not. Once they've gotten the context and they've digested it, then I'm all ears, because I'm waiting for those solutions. I'm dying for those key insights, those key solutions or suggestions, because we know it's trial and error, but at least, hopefully the experts do listen to the context, because every, we talked about persona mapping. So that's part of the context. If I don't provide that to you, how can you give me advice, right? And then so it's a two-way game. But I think you're right. I think some CEOs, business owners are so focused, or on a use case, or on how their product should be used, that they become like they get tunnel vision, and they're not able to kind of, and they come to buy something or buy a service thinking it's going to fix their problems, but they don't allow the flexibility of what those ideas are going to be.
That's it. I mean, look, at any agency or in any context, consultants come with a lot of respect, firstly, for the business. It's culturally just unheard of to go in feeling like you know more than the founder. Often what they've learned through almost a lifetime of experience sometimes is bigger than or more valuable than what you might learn if you spend hours and hours of man hours to sort of try and unearth those insights. At the same time, you have to be able to do your job, which is bring objectivity, show them where the customers' mindsets are at. And so to that end, personas is something that we are deeply invested in. We use the tools that allow us to build top-line personas, but we also encourage clients to invest in research, and not just quant, but qualitative research, interviews, and doing that in an iterative way is helpful. Digital offers a lot of data, but sometimes the data it can offer is more damaging than helpful. And to be able to go into the depths of solution, you have to be able to take it in perspective.
And I mean, this is the perfect segue to the next question I have is, we talk about data. And
Yeah.
obviously the big buzzword and the biggest seismic shift we're all living through it is AI, the new AI, generative AI, and all these tools that have suddenly popped up, and more every day. It's incredible, right? Now there's AI that can create text, there's AI that can create videos from just text to video and so forth. How has AI, and you guys are established serious business with established brands, you work with global brands, so you are very, I'm sure, very careful in how you use tools, tried and tested for sure, so I'm sure you're careful. But how are some of the ways that you're looking at AI, maybe in data analytics or even in content creation? Are you helping customers leverage that for content creation?
Look, I mean, there are layers to this. The fact is that AI has been around. I think it's just been supercharged in this age of convergence. So, and I believe that's what Web 3.0 is all about, right? The abilities that existed in silos are now sort of converging, and you do have access to a much more intelligent service or tools. However, I feel like AI cannot stand without EI, which is emotional intelligence, and I feel like the human side to things does need to prevail. AI today is definitely a productivity hack, and if you're not aware of how many people in your teams are already using it, perhaps using it badly, you'd be remiss to assume that you're not affected by AI. And there are a lot of people who have like their heads in the sand. But increasingly, what I find fascinating is even early adopters haven't thought about the ethics in the use of AI. A lot of brands, businesses, behemoths are wondering where all of that data, when it's fed into Gen AI, goes. Who's learning from it? Which machine is keeping track of all of that? And I think there's a massive, element of trust, or the lack of trust, that needs to be addressed. But also, what's the sustainability impact of AI? You're talking about cloud computing, the servers that it's sort of so dependent on, and we're going into a future that will be far more supercharged, right? So there's a lot to consider. It's not it's not one conversation.
Yeah,
it's many conversations that need to be navigated towards that sort of constructive convergence.
It's not cut and dried, and we have some very, very bright people warning us about the dangers of AI and what happens to that data, right? And what are some of the guardrails that they've put into their tools to ensure that people don't misuse AI to do evil or bad things. And then where the data ends up, that's something that actually where Web3 can actually contribute. There are some projects out there that using blockchain to track the content that is being used by the model, so that it could actually reward or identify using blockchain, which data was used for which by which model, and then you start to get into that space where you reward IP, because as you may know, there are some lawsuits right now between some of the big newspapers and some of the big AI companies around. They've swallowed all that data and they're using it, but they haven't paid for it.
And publishers are, increasingly far more cautious. They are actually asking to opt out of, their firewall, or not firewall, their content that sort of sits behind the paywall should not be accessible to AI and so on. I feel like the reality, though, is that the machine will learn what you teach it. If you're going to give it access to the absolute lower end of content, it's going to learn trash. It learns what you teach it.
Yeah, we say garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
Rishi, it's been a pleasure having you here. I think we've learned a lot of things from you today, and look forward to having you back again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm waiting to learn more.